Alright, so I don't know about you guys, but for me when I was little, when I would watch National Geographic, I would see like the prairie dogs or the meerkats or like any just one of those cool animals, and I would point at them and I would yell at my mom, that's the animal I want. But I was always told no. So that's what I'm going to talk to you guys about today, is about owning exotic animals. So the spruce.com defined exotic animals just as like having an animal in your house that's not an ordinary house animal, such as a dog or a cat, as well as a farm animal. So as long as it's like something that's out of those areas, it's considered an exotic animal. So even birds are exotic animals. So some pros of having exotic animals, you have bragging rights, obviously. Because how cool would it be able to say, like, if you go to your friends and just be like, hey, I have a tiger. Like, do you have a tiger? No, you don't. I do. So you obviously have bragging rights. Some other stuff, so some animals even act as, like, guards. So, like, a llama, they actually guard, like, they can guard vegetables or whatever. They may eat the vegetables, but they still guard them from, like, other animals. You can have, like, some reptiles will be considered like pest control. So if you have like lizards or snakes or spiders, like they eat the bugs that are around your house. So you have like pest control right there instead of actually having to call pest control. You have some other exotic animals can also provide you food. So it's kind of like a quail. A quail can provide you food, such as their eggs, and it's like owning a regular farm animal, but these eggs are a little bit better for you, according to pethelpful.com. Another thing is like some other reasons to why it's good to like own some like of these exotic animals, like you know those videos on YouTube or on Facebook that you see, and it's like this lady, one of them that I saw, this lady saw like a koala coming towards her in Australia, and she was wondering why it was coming towards her, and I guess like she just found out that like when this koala had like a lake source to get its water from, and it got destroyed, and the water like had like completely evaporated and like was dug out, like the little area was like dug out, so it didn't have its water source anymore. And it came up to her for water. And so she was feeding it water, and then it ended up just staying around. And so she ended up keeping it because he was now relying on her for its needs, its thirst needs, its hunger needs. Also, like if its habitat, if its home is destroyed, it's also really good to help out those because you can also save that species, according to USA Today, with a few people were also in Australia as well, and they had seen I forgot what animal, I think it was another koala. I believe it was another koala, and its home had been completely destroyed for housing. And so these people took in this koala and ended up finding out that it had babies somewhere else. And they found the babies, and they took in all of them, and they raised them themselves. And they grew up, and they were able to find a new habitat for them within a zoo. But the 3 years that they had kept them, they completely now relied on humans. So like they were just helping them out, and then they had to give them to the zoo though, because they were no longer had the money to keep up with that. So obviously having an exotic animals, there are like some cons, such as like these animals do have specific like needs for for their food. For their food, it can be a little bit more. Some animals require live food; they won't eat dead animals. So, and if that does happen, you have to have like a trusted supplier. So it costs a lot. Also, like some states don't allow animals. And sadly, if you wanted to own one here in California, you would not be allowed to. You would have to move to somewhere like Nevada or Texas, or those states have little bans on certain animals, and that's according to livescience.com. And so some states that they don't have bans on animals, they just require you to have a permit. It would be like Texas, Idaho, Arizona, North and South Carolina. And then a few states, if you did want to own an animal and you didn't want to get a permit, you would have to move to Wisconsin, Wyoming, Montana, and then, yeah, so if you guys want to own an exotic animal, go to those. They're furry and friendly. Yeah.
All right, Riley, what did you think?
I like how you started out with a childhood memory. I thought it was a really good intro. And I like how you stated in the beginning what defines an exotic animal. I thought that was helpful, for the audience. You started out with the benefits, and I noticed that you had a lot of evidence, and you used stories. And then you had cons, specific needs, food, and then how states don't allow it or they have permits. And I noticed that you had evidence for those too. The only thing is you didn't have a strong conclusion. But I thought your delivery was really good, and you kept eye contact, and you didn't seem super nervous. I thought you looked confident. So I thought it was really good overall, just towards the end when you didn't have a conclusion, and that's it.
All right, well, I'm like you. I like the personal story at the beginning of the speech. I think that kind of sets us up and gets us engaged. I did think that your definition of what an exotic animal is a little bit abstract, and I'm a little conflicted and confused because it sounds to me like you think that owning exotic animals is a great idea and that people should all go out and get something. But when you talk about the problems later on, I think maybe you neglect to talk about some of the major issues with some exotic animals. I think there's probably a good argument to be made for people being willing to try certain kinds of animals as pets. I don't know that they should head to Australia and get themselves a koala, or check and see if there's a local tiger exchange that they can get a tiger from. And I think that because you aren't really as clearly focused on where you think people ought to do this or what kinds of animals you think they ought to be doing, and not necessarily giving us a strong set of reasons to do it, that the speech is less successful than it could be. Your justification for having animals at the beginning, well, we got bragging rights, they could be guards, and pest control. And I'm going, well, the bragging rights thing, I think that's probably the main reason that a lot of people get animals. You know, my dog's cuter than yours, my cat's cuter than yours, my koala's weirder than any pet you ever had. Look at me, I'm walking a raccoon on a leash. You know, here's my ocelot, you know, that kind of stuff. People, you know, think of it as being kind of cool and that sort of thing. On the other hand, I hear a lot of people suggesting that kind of stuff is problematic, even with the farm animals that aren't necessarily considered exotic. That, you know, people lose interest in them. You know, and they get they're not cared for well. They don't have the environment in which they need to function. You know, I suppose that if you have some kinds of animals, they could be guards, but it seems to me like you'd have to have a pretty big animal, and, you know, other than dogs, you know, I don't know, bears and lions and tigers and that sort of thing. That seems like it's maybe going a little bit overboard. On the pest control thing, most people, I don't think, let their lizards run free in the house to control the pests, so that seems like a little bit of a stretch also. The idea of the quail's eggs was kind of interesting, so that, you know, that. But what we don't get is we don't get any information from people other than the koalas about any of these animals and the advantages of it. And the koala stories are kind of interesting, but it doesn't really seem like it's practical. And in fact, the second koala story you tell us ends up with the family not being able to keep the koalas. They've actually kind of tainted them so that they can't really survive on their own, and they have to give them up to a zoo. And I'm going, and this is a reason why I should have an animal that's exotic? That's a little bit confusing. It's inconsistent, and I think that you need to be more consistent in making your argument. I had trouble figuring out what the organizational structure is. Riley gave you a better organizational structure than I thought I heard in her kind of analysis of the argument. So I think that, you know, there is probably a structure there, but I think you need to give us a way to see it a little bit more. The needs issue, when you're talking about some of the reservation arguments at the end, why it's problematic. You mentioned food issues, but you don't really give us particular examples. I don't know what quails have to eat that's different. I don't know what koalas have to eat that's different. And I can imagine that, you know, lions and tigers, you got to feed them live animals, I guess, or something like that. You mentioned live animals, and I have some familiarity with that, having owned what I guess would be counted as a exotic pet, because it's not a barnyard animal and everything. You know, I had a snake for a number of years, and you got to feed them live animals, you know, because they don't like to eat the dead stuff, you know, that sort of thing. But I'm not exactly sure I would have thought of him as being an exotic animal in the same way, and he's certainly not. You know, Samson was not a pest control tool. You know, yeah, Samson, he was a ball python. You know, that kind of thing. So the stuff about the state regulations, here's the thing, that seems like that ought to be at the start of the speech. In other words, here's the problem. People would like to have exotic pets, but there's so many restrictions that keep them from having access to them. There's so many rules that they have to follow that make it hard for them to take care of their pets or obtain them, you know, that sort of thing. So if you really want to have you know, these wild animals as part of your life, and you think that you could care for them, you could create your own animal refuge or something along those lines and rescue a species from possible extinction, you need to move to Wyoming and create a farm or a ranch or something like that. That seems like it's a little extreme. It's an interesting topic. I don't think you have as much focus on it as it needs to have, and like I said, I think it needs a little bit more organization too. Delivery issues, your voice is fine, your audience contact is pretty good, you have some good gestures, but you do seem a little bit passive while you're speaking, and at the end especially, it just feels like you're happy to be done as opposed to happy to be with us, and that shouldn't be the impression that you give people at the end of the speech. You want to leave them feeling like this was a good experience for you and for them. Okay, thank you.